Hope this woke all of you up and you're all geared for the next session on AI-driven agri-value chain. Let us discuss with the agri-tech leaders how AI-enabled organizations build farm-to-fork models, how are food and crops maintained, also learn why creating connected agri-value chains is a priority for the nation. We have with us Mr. Praveen P., PhD, VP, Data SE and AI Crop and Technologies as our speaker. Prior to his current appointment, he was with Corteva Agri-Sciences, formerly Dow DuPont Agriculture Division, leading the data science and machine learning team in Hyderabad. The moderator of the session is Ankit Bose, Head of AI Strategy Office, NASSCOM. Pleasure to have you both here with us this afternoon. Over to you, Ankit.
Thank you, Justin. Hi, Praveen, and hello, everyone. So let's start our discussion on AI-driven agri-value chain. So human population has doubled to 7.5 billion in last 50 years. Globally, 811 million people face hunger. And in India, 189 million people are undernourished. So what are your thoughts, Praveen? Is it due to shortage in food produce?
Hey, Ankit. Thanks so much for your question as well. So let's actually a little bit look at, I would say that the current challenges which you highlighted, right? Like superficially, when you look at it from an external perspective, it looks like there is, issues in, production, loss of production itself. But, if you just drill down into the details of it, and if you look at in general from the life cycle and also from the farmer's perspective, right? Like, so it's not just the food production itself, but how much of food is available for the consumer, right? Like, so if you look at the life cycle of typical of agriculture from seed to fork and table, right? In fact, in certain cases, there is really an excess of production, right? Even under the current circumstances, for example, the farmers, if you look at it from the eyes and lens of a farmer's perspective, like, they are doing their best to, despite all the climate-related stress, so they are, still producing food, and more than ever, there is a lot of effort and inputs going into the agriculture sector itself, from multiple segments, and yet the reason why there is an apparent shortage of food is not because of the production itself, but related it's got a lot to do with the loss in production, post-harvest losses, storage, and how actually it reaches from the farm itself to the consumer's table, right? Like, so there is a lot of other elements also. And related to the earlier point which I also raised is that because of right now, as we speak, we are, talking about global warming, and that has actually, really put a lot of stress on the farmers' ability to produce certain crops. So they've been more and more looking at resilient crops, right? Those crops which can actually grow under with limited water or under heavy pest and disease stresses. So there is, excessive production in certain of the food, certain of the grains and certain of vegetables, and less importance to certain other crops, right? Now, what happens with that is that when there is excessive production and there is not sufficient demand also for that, then a lot of it goes, into wastage and, and we don't have very good mechanisms of storage and distribution as well, right? Like, so all of this actually compounds to the apparent view that we have currently of food being not available. So it is kind of like interlinked as well, and not related to loss in food production alone.
Great explanation, right? So you touch upon various components in the life cycle, right? So for our audience, can you take us through how is the life cycle from seed to fork?
Sure, Ankit. So, I myself am an organic farmer, and I can actually give you an idea of how it looks for me, right? Like, when I, so I can put myself in the shoes of a farmer as well. So I can tell you that when I am looking at, my own farm, right? I'm looking at, growing and when I'm looking at the market, so obviously I'm not like, dependent on my farm for my daily sustenance. And yet, I'm looking at what kind of crops will be growing in that region, where my farm is. The availability of seeds, right? Like sometimes I use hybrid seeds, sometimes I use like heirloom, native varieties of seeds, because those are some of them which are really also climate resistant, right? Like, and local seeds tend to, behave much more resilient rather than, certain seeds which, come from the outside, right? So I look at all of those parameters, right? And an important thing, so I'm looking at probably what is the right time of sowing those seeds. If I want to, in a certain way, climate proof my my farm, also what I also try to do is not to depend on, horticultural vegetables and alone, but I also try to bring in some perennials, right? Like you're looking at fruits and dependency on trees, more fruit growing and trees that can actually also become an additional revenue, right? So a lot of farmers actually think in that perspective, right? And so then I'm once I procure the seeds, then I look at, is this the right time of sowing? Now, the challenge here, Ankit, is that if I wait for the rain, and then I sow it, then like last few days, you've seen that we are having, like, for example, excessive rain, right? So then my seeds can get washed off, right? So all of this is parameters which I have to look at, and and then after the seeds emerge and sprout and emerge, and then it starts growing, then I have to also protect it, right? Like look at supplementing it with fertilizers, be it natural, or supplementing it with certain micronutrients. And then wait for the harvest, right? Like providing it with water and enough inputs. And then when I'm looking at the right time to harvest, and ensuring that I've actually survived that period, then I'm looking at collecting the harvesting, the yield, and then bringing it to the market, right? Like so even there is sometimes our farmers, like, because it's a small landholding farmers, there's not enough produce to merit actually like organizing a big transport, right? So that's where actually cooperatives come, multiple farmers coming together, and they can pool in resources, bring it to the nearest the mandi or the marketplace for selling it, right? Like so these are actual challenges which I have faced. Like I sometimes I look at my own produce, and it has there's not enough amount of so the transport is going to cost me more than the amount of money that I spent in producing itself, right? So these are actual problems, right? And so there is a lot that goes inside before a particular fruit or vegetable actually comes to a consumer's table, and then then the local distribution, and until it comes to the retail and our own. Sometimes there might be direct purchase from farmers, sometimes it's through a retail agency, right? So when we actually directly purchase from farmers, you can actually know the benefits like that goes into production, right? And we can talk about that later. But all of this becomes very important parameters before we actually get the food onto our table, and we don't realize that there's a lot of effort that goes into it.
Great, thank you. So my next question to you is that supply chain and value chain. Many times these words are used interchangeably, but is that correct? What do you think, Praveen?
That's also a great question. In fact, like there is a lot of maybe like people think that it's quite similar, but supply chain, I think it is used in a variety of industries as well, and so it's got to do with how the from the farmer to the end consumer, right? The producer to the consumer, what is the available modes of reaching that, right? While value chain is like really end to end, right? And when you look at, for example, what is a value for a farmer as with respect to a consumer, it's very different, right? Like for a farmer, like I rightly I earlier mentioned also, they are looking at, earlier they were looking at yield, right? Like if I am looking at a particular crop and I'm looking at harvesting that, am I, until it reaches the market, it still is a, big problem for the farmer, right? Like until that actually gets sold and they get the money, right? So the value is, earlier used to be only in terms of, can I get the, the return that, or much more, than what I'd invested. Sometimes it's even lesser. Sometimes they purchase seeds, or they have to, so much of agri inputs goes into it, that at the end, the amount of profit that they make is so paltry that it's just enough to, purchase the inputs and the seed for the next season, and they don't have enough, right? So value for a farmer is very different than a value for a consumer. And these days, actually, a lot of, people have been putting more thoughts on, the earlier system of looking at it from yield related value has changed now to looking at how can I bring value for a farmer. Let's say that they are actually like just, at the moment of harvesting, there's a huge, rain event, right? Like a flood that comes in, right? So their whole of the produce is lost, so we are really looking at that particular moment, and then, all the inputs that they have put is lost, right? So because the yield is lost, so their value is also lost, Now we are actually like changing the game. And in fact, we are realizing that these humble, small landholding farmers are actually like climate heroes, really speaking, In fact, even as we speak, even the most commonest crops are like maize, paddy, and soybean, and like the most, popular ones. Even those can actually like account for, a lot of soil organic carbon storage, and also the amount of carbon dioxide that gets absorbed into the biomass, So these are actual climate barriers. So even if you don't look at like yield as an outcome, even the whole of the, the crop life cycle itself, the amount of carbon dioxide that it actually takes from the atmosphere, is actually bringing a huge difference to the world, right? Like, so in fact, like farmers, I would consider as unrecognized heroes of the world, right? Of the planet. But that value we have to provide, right? Like, so we have to say that, okay, if they are absorbing so much of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, we have to give credit to them, So can we give carbon credit? That's a value for a farmer, right? So we might not be focused on the end output, but we should also be focusing on the process itself, right? Are they using climate friendly practices, So we have to incentivize that, right? So that's for a farmer, right? And we have to change the whole value game for them. For consumers also, more and more consumers are becoming very conscious, right, of where their food comes from, and they want to know that. So they want to know how their food is produced, where it's coming from. There are consumers who are becoming very conscious, So we are also talking about like, in terms of, solutions itself, as we speak for this particular forum as well, and for those, the interest, we're looking at traceability, right? They are interested in knowing, okay, if I'm purchasing a mango from today, and you can actually like have a simple QR code, right? And you can trace it to the nearest farm, and you can actually, this is happening, in the rest of the world. And I'm sure that in India, it's also going to, happen very soon. But you can actually trace it now, even in India, to the farm in which it has come from. So you, if you buy a mango, sometimes you'll see that there is a QR code on it, and you just scan it with your phone. You can know, like, you can trace it to the nearest farm. And then you can also kind of like in the future, maybe calculate how much of, how much of carbon has gone into that food production. Not only that, also we talked about supply chain, right? How much of it has gone into that, bringing it to the table, right? And you can also minimize that. You don't want to actually have a, apple coming from another country, right? Like, because that's a very positive carbon footprint, right? So even you might produce it organically, you might produce it sustainably, but if you're actually like bringing it from across the globe, then you're actually like, being very, very carbon positive, right? So those, so consumers are becoming very conscious. They want to say, okay, I want to know how much of pesticides has been used, before. These days, for example, for mangoes, like we just finished the mango season, right? Like, and A lot of people want to know, like, has it been like naturally ripened, or was there, like an additive added for ripening? So these are things which even as we speak, we can do, right? So the technology plays a big role in all of this, and we are, like really doing that even as we speak. But in the future, you can also like kind of like do that carbon accounting as well, right? For each of the stuff that we eat. So, and even as we speak, that is bringing value to the customers and the consumers, right? The taste, where it comes from, is it sustainably produced? So all of these are very important points that we touch upon.
Thank you for a really elaborate walkthrough of the whole life cycle and explaining us how value chain or value is the key, right? So can you take us through what are the challenges faced by the farmers and how the new AI technologies can help them?
Right. So we are talking in terms of so we have worked with a lot of farmers in India, right? And we are very conscious that when we are providing technology to them, it should be available at something which is first usable, and there is not a hype to it, like, that it's really something which they can use. And there is, it has to be also very, very cost effective, or sometimes it comes at zero price for them, right? Like somebody else has to pay for it, but for them, it's like, it comes at a zero cost, right? Like, there are government initiatives into that, like for large program initiatives for farmers and development agencies. But when you're looking at these small landholding farmers, right, what does a technology solution look like, right? For them, like it can be like, for example, currently we have like weather models, right? Like which can actually like give you an idea over the next 15 days, like how the weather is changing, how whether can you expect, like I talked about, like for example, sowing, right? Like if, for example, in the next 15 days, I'm going to have like heavy rainfall, right? Then I can do a late sowing. I can actually have like shorter duration crops. I can grow that. Those are some decisions that I can actually make, right? Like, so we are having like more and more better models that are actually getting weather models that they're getting built. So I can actually take decisions with respect to the right time of sowing, like the right time of harvesting, right? So those are things which are very essential for farmers. But not only that, like, when we are talking about, pest and disease is an important thing, right? Like, for example, 3 weeks back, I was, visiting a farm in Kerala, where there is a lot of cocoa farmers, and you're looking at, this kind of like fungal disease, attacking the cocoa pods, right? The chocolate, where chocolate comes from. And, we can actually, like 15 days in advance, we can use different models to actually like predict also pest and disease incidents. What's the risk of, how much of risk that a particular farmer, if the host plant, how much of risk that the particular farmer has with respect to the, the current growing weather conditions. We can monitor that using satellite image. We can know, if you have like a, an acre or a couple of acres of land, which is quite common, by the way, in India, like typical land holding size being 1.5 to 1.7 acres. You can monitor that and say, like where the both the biotic and abiotic stresses are more using satellite imaging. You can actually monitor that. And then you can actually provide also advisory for farmers, like right advisory at the right time is very critical. Now, imagine a situation that whether the farmer is like an organic farmer or using, some chemical inputs also, irrespective of that, let's say that you are actually going for a spraying, right? Like preventive spraying. And then some of these farmers actually like do spraying with drones, even as we speak in India, like you have like, you can fit a can of, inputs to a drone and fly it, and you can actually fly it across the particular land. And in fact, it's very popular among farmers, because some of the farms are, they have difficulty in access and everything, But imagine that I'm spraying it, and tomorrow, like, immediately after spraying, I have a rain falling, right? So all of them gets washed away, right? So timely application is very important. You can even give advisory saying that spray it at this time or hold on to it. Don't spray it now. just let the, this particular week go by and, just wait for it. And then spray, right? Like, so right time of spraying makes a huge difference in terms of production, right? And not only that, like sometimes, certain farmers, they just go and spray and they don't realize that these insecticides can affect like natural pollinators. This is an actual event that happened. So you have like flowering that happens and the flower has come out, but you don't have natural pollinators because the farmer has done the spraying and it has actually killed all the pollinators, right? So, the flower is there, but you don't have any fruiting happening, So those are some interventions, advisory that we can provide to the farmers, and we are able to do that, by through sending them SMSs, sending them, through working with government bodies, with organizations, right? So pest and disease and, we can actually provide forecasting advice, and we have a big role to play there, in technology. And this actually is, when we do it for small landholding farmers in India, it's very easy to scale that up actually to, other geographies, in fact, so when we actually make it for India, you actually have the ability of scaling it up because we are talking about other geographies, here down south, it's small farms, but, you're looking at monocrops, large swaths of land, so it's relatively simple to monitor that, So this problem is complex here, but once we solve the complex problem, the others become simple.
Great. I must thank you, Praveen, for a very insightful session. I personally learned a lot. For our audience, can you summarize the key takeaways, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, what I wanted to highlight is that right now, as we speak, there are a lot of, open problems also in agriculture, right? Like, the AI and technology, we're just like scratching the surface, while in other industries, it is like actually like matured. There are very few players who are actually like really bringing a difference to the agricultural technology sector, right? And there are really a lot of open problems and challenges. And I talked about, for ability for farmers, incentivizing the farmers, right? Not only for their yield, but, the process of production, right? How do we monitor that, So even as we speak, we are, having more and more satellites are getting launched, high resolution satellites imaging both spatially and spectrally are coming, right? How can we use that, along with current recent machine learning models that are getting built, right? Like we are, even with respect to AI, we are kind of like moving our way towards unsupervised, like approaches, right? So, with minimum labeling and everything. So how can we like, accelerate that, this whole process together with recent sensors, with recent imaging modalities, with recent sensors, both in space and the ground, right? And this field is like green, for lack of a better word, a pun intended. And so there are a lot of open opportunities where, there is a direct impact for farmers and consumers and across the different, life cycle of in the agriculture as well, from seed to, even I didn't talk about it, but seed genetics itself is a very, very important research, right? Like what kind of seeds that is produced, like how highly resilient, climate resilient, pest resilient seeds, how to combine that with our own heirloom varieties. These are very, very interesting areas of research, where we have made breakthroughs in healthcare, for example, and even in the same thing has, cross-pollinated in agriculture, so these are ideas which are like, getting exchanged across the different, verticals as well, right? Like, and there is a lot, even as we speak, there is a sense of urgency in solving problems in agriculture sector, because people are suddenly realizing that we don't have a lot of time with respect to the, the current situation with respect to global warming, right? And, and this is where, we can make a big impact together, right? As I said, like very small landholding farmers itself are contributing a lot to mitigating, the greenhouse gases which are present in the atmosphere, absorbing them, right? How can we help them, monitor them, incentivize them, for the and using, the different available technologies, sensors, solutions, right? Like these are very, very raw and green problems, and I would say that, and we have to solve it right now because there is really that sense of urgency to bring this all together.
Great. Thank you again, Praveen, and my audience. Handing over to Justin. Thank you.
Thank you, Ankit.
Thank you, Praveen, for summing up those key takeaways. And thank you, Ankit and Praveen, once again for that engaging fireside.